The J. Michael Show.
Getting started on season 2 of The J. Michael Show. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. And my guest today is Tina Djuretic. She is the author of a wonderful book. Tell me the name of it, Tina.
It's called Finding My Sovereignty.
Finding My Sovereignty. Let's meet Tina. Yeah, I have all kinds of things here to look at, and the cover of your book was not one of them.
That's all right. I've got it sitting over here somewhere.
Oh, yeah. Well, hold it up so people can see what it looks like.
Let's see. There we go. Let's see. We'll put that in there. There we go. Finding My Sovereignty. Let's see
there
if we
we
can hit that
go. Yeah,
a little
good
bit
look
better.
at it.
There we go.
Perfect.
There we go.
Perfect. Now, tell me about the book.
Well, this is a memoir, so it's my life story, and it really concentrates on how my childhood trauma, which was something that I buried. I forgot my childhood trauma. I knew the big strokes, but it was mostly buried. But it's about how whether or not you bury your childhood trauma, whether or not you remember it, if it goes unhealed and unchecked, it is going to lead you into some really toxic relationships. And so it follows my life from abusive childhood to a Christian cult, into these 3 toxic relationships that I had until I finally understood that there was a pattern, and I sought healing for that pattern.
Okay, tell me about this Christian cult. How did you get involved in that?
Well, this would have been my parents did that. So when I was 10 is when we joined this cult. And a little bit of backstory there is that my mom was French Canadian. So she was Catholic, raised Catholic, and she was raised Catholic. So she was very Catholic. Mm-hmm. Catholic school, the whole shebang, had lots of fear around that kind of, because there's all that fear being taught in the Catholic Church. And my father came from the former Yugoslavia, so specifically in Montenegro, which is now its own country. But this is a very Orthodox religion. And although he would have called himself Orthodox, he didn't go to church. So he was Orthodox by birth, if you will, but not a very religious person. However, when the 2 of them got pregnant, which is what happened, and decided to get married, well, this was an incredibly huge problem for my grandparents on both sides. Mm-hmm. So because of religion, my father was, I don't even know if it was really religion for my father. My mother's mother really just used to call him that foreigner. I think that was more the issue. A little bit of racism there. Whereas on the dad's side, on my father's side, it was like, you cannot marry a Catholic. Like, they lost it over that. And so they were disowned. My parents were disowned by both of their parents when they got married. So we didn't know grandparents. We didn't know cousins. We didn't know anything growing up. We didn't know anything about our past, or their past more specifically, because they never talked about it. Mm-hmm. So when they got married, they had no religion. And this was their compromise. But there was a school bus that used to come around and knock on the doors and ask the children if they'd like to go to Sunday school. And all the kids in the neighborhood were going to this Pentecostal church. And so my parents saw the opportunity to get rid of us for a couple of hours every morning on Sunday. They liked that it was neither Catholic nor Orthodox. So it didn't, sort of like fall on either one of their sides. It was completely different. Mm-hmm. And so we went to this Sunday school for, I'd say 2 years before my parents ever decided to come. And so every Sunday the bus would pick us up. We'd go to Sunday school. And of course, every Easter they would put on a big play, and we'd always be in it because we're the kids, right? So we'd sing some songs, or, we weren't in the play. We were like the kids around the feet of Jesus or something as he died on the cross. I don't know. So every Easter, every Christmas, they would put on these plays. And of course, we would always beg our parents to go. We would always be The church was always like, make sure you bring your parents. You're actually in this. How exciting. And also, we'll give you a big prize if you bring your parents, right? So, of course, we're kids and we wanted the prize.
Right.
So we harassed them for like 2 years, when these holidays would come around, but they never wanted to come. So they didn't. And then this one particular Sunday, the church people knocked on the door every Saturday. It was like clockwork. They knocked on the door trying to convince my parents to come to church. And my parents said yes. Well, my mother said yes. And she said to my dad, I think we should go to this time. And of course, we're super excited because we're kids and we're thinking, yeah, we're going to get a shower prize, right? We're going to get some big old awesome thing because we're bringing our parents to church. No, it was a chocolate bar, by the way. So, as a kid, maybe exciting, but worth selling my soul? Not so much.
Right.
And that's where it began. So they showed up and came to see this play on Sunday school. And right there on the spot, they were converted to Christianity.
Huh.
And yeah, like instantly. It was crazy.
Did you feel like you were being indoctrinated while you were going to Sunday school?
I have to imagine that we were. How could you not be? But I think as well, your children, right? So they're going to stick with lessons that I think are appropriate for children. I don't ever sort of being in a fear-based mentality when I went to Sunday school, but when we joined the church full time and started to go to church 3 to 4 times a week, we weren't allowed to speak to anyone that wasn't part of church. We were completely separated and isolated. This is why I call it a cult, because anybody that tells you you can't speak to people that don't go to your church and don't ask questions. Also, it was one of those churches. Don't ask questions, just do as you're told. This falls into cult territory. Give us all your money, right? Don't speak to anyone outside of the church. You're not allowed to have friends outside of the church, that kind of thing. And then, of course, all these just really crazy imposed rules. We immediately got rid of our television. We weren't allowed to listen to music if it wasn't Christian anymore. We were pulled out of public school and forced to go to the church's Christian school because then they could brainwash us even more, right? Let alone 4 times a week you're going to church, 7 days a week you're going, or 5 days a week you're going to school. So it was really all encompassing.
Tell me, was there anything very traumatic that happened at that point in your life?
Oh, absolutely. Sure.
Yeah.
Even before joining the church, my mother had a mental illness. She's bipolar. Being baby boomers, completely undiagnosed. Nobody ever talked about it. It was the elephant in the room nobody ever talked about, right?
Right.
I'm not even sure they understood what it was, to be fair. Right? We've come a long way understanding where these illnesses start. I think for a long time, they just thought that my mother suffered from depression. But I had a bipolar mother. I have a father from again, the former Yugoslavia. He was really heavy-handed. And so there was a lot of abuse in the home. I didn't particularly think it was different than anyone else's home at that time, because when you're a kid, you think everybody grows up that way, right? And it was the 70s, we raised ourselves. We're the Gen X, we're the latchkey kids. But my parents were incredibly strict, always. And then when we joined the church, it really gave them permission to become even worse, because now they were supported by God and by a preacher who, this is a fire and damnation kind of a church. Think of your Southern Baptist style, loud preaching, exciting, to be fair, great choirs, lots of music, speaking in tongues, dancing in the aisles,
Jumping
falling down
pews.
the floor. Yeah, right. It was that kind of a church. And so it was a lot of fire and brimstone, and it was a lot of fear mongering. This was not a church that preached the love of God. It was a church that preached that you're going to go straight to hell and burn there for all eternity if you don't follow their rules.
Right.
Well, you give narcissistic parents that kind of power, and they ran with it.
Yeah.
So it became a lot worse. And the rules became harder. So, of course, it became an impossible situation for three teenage girls trying to navigate becoming teenagers and also having these crazy rules, right? You're not allowed to wear pants. You can only wear skirts. You're not allowed to wear makeup or jewelry or play sports or go swimming unless you can do that in a dress, right? Like it was really, we were the church freaks walking down the street in public. So then you don't even want to have anyone who's not in the church as your friends because you're being judged by them for how freakish you look.
Yeah.
So it was all of that. It was a horrible home life, a horrible school and church life. And then even being out in public, we were shunned and scorned and made to feel,
Yeah.
that we were
So
crazy.
what was the point where you felt you needed to escape from that?
I would say, I had a sister who was only a year older than me, but she was a lot smarter than I was, a lot wiser. I was the typical middle child, the peacekeeper. I'm the empath in the family. I always tried to keep the peace and make everyone laugh and, do those. I could sing and dance and act. And so I would do those things. And, that was my thing. My older sister, she really understood what was happening. I mean, I always made excuses for other people's bad behavior and tried to, again, keep the peace. But she was the angry, teenager who understood. And I'd say I was probably 12 when my mother decided to have another baby. And my father flipped. He's like, became very poor when we joined the church as well. They had to my father had to leave his job because he used to be the maitre d' in very expensive restaurants and he wasn't allowed to push alcohol anymore. So he left all he'd ever known. And it was the 80s and the economy failed right at this time. So it was just the perfect storm for us to go into pretty severe poverty at that time. So my mom decides she wants another baby when we're teenagers because all of us were born outside of the church. Therefore, we were just these terrible, horrible children. She wanted her perfect church baby. And my dad was like, we cannot afford another baby. Plus, they're teenagers. Well, I don't want another baby. And they had another baby because all she had to do was go off the pill and lie, right?
Right.
Right? How many women have done that?
Uh-huh.
And so she got her baby. And then the three of us, it's like, you're no good to me anymore. I don't even know why you're in our home. So you're going to become the slaves that now keep this house clean. So we were nothing but slaves to her.
Wow.
The beatings got worse because we got older. So we got mouthier. We got lippier, right? We started to fight back. We started to have logical arguments.
Yeah.
Nobody likes that. And I'd say 13, 14, we knew we were in trouble. By 15, I thought for sure I'd be dead if I stayed there any longer. We used to threaten, like, we're going to call the police. And my parents would just laugh at us. Again, we're in the 80s now. They would just laugh and go, yeah, call the police. What do you think's going to happen? You think they're going to believe you over us? We're God-fearing Christians, right? You're teenagers. Like we did. So we never made that phone call because we were so afraid.
Right.
At 16, when I was mid 16, my older sister ran away from home. 6 months later, I was right out the door behind her. So I was just barely 17. I was in the middle of grade 12 when I finally left.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So then you met a channeler at some point. Tell me about
that came later.
Yeah.
Well, I had little touches of spirituality, if you will, throughout my 20s and 30s, but I didn't meet this channeler that really kickstarted a spiritual awakening, if you will, until 4 years ago. But before that, I met someone who was spiritual. She was my first sort of introduction to spirituality. At the time, I was still like super anti everything, right? Like I didn't understand the difference between religion and spirituality. So I was just anti every religion,
Right.
out there. But she planted the seeds. She opened my eyes. She helped me understand that it's different. And I really thought that was a super cool thing. So, 10 years later, I met with a shaman and had a reading because I lived in Mexico for a long time. Met with him again 2 years later and had a reading, but they were always years between these readings. It wasn't easy. You couldn't just go on YouTube and find someone like you can these days. It was harder back then. And,
Right.
I was always worried about false people who were false prophets, if you will, and that kind of thing. And, I was broke myself. So it was money. So I did it sparingly. But this particular channeler that you're talking about, she came later in life. And I think Spirit was finally like, you've had 1 foot in and 1 foot out of spirituality for the last 25 years. Get in or get out, right? It's time to get in or get out.
Right.
And it led me into a relationship that was doomed to fail in the first place, because that was Spirit's point, right? Spirit was like, man, I have been trying to show you this pattern with toxic relationships and you aren't listening. So let's really give you a big one so that I'm going to blow the house down this time. And you can't not hear this message.
Right.
So I met this partner. I'm in my mid 40s and that's it. I'm done looking. He's the one. It's a romantic story. He's from college. We haven't seen each other in 20 years. I've been traveling the world since we last met. He got married and had kids since we last met, something we both wanted to do. I wanted to travel the world. He wanted to get married. Now he's getting divorced. I'm leaving cruise ships where I used to work. I'm coming home to Vancouver. The two of us meet almost by accident. Like, it was just so beautiful and so kismet. And for me, I'm like, this is it. This is my love story. This is my romantic story. Thank you for finally, after all the crap I've been through in life, for delivering me this gorgeous human being.
But it
who
was a
ended
lesson.
up being bipolar. Oh my God. He ended up being bipolar, just like my mother.
Oh.
And I have not managed to date a bipolar person up until now, but I had plenty of bipolar friends. And they came and went out of my life because it's always going to go ugly and it's always going to explode because that's where it's going. So when it ended, and I knew that I discovered he was bipolar. This is why it ended. Because I had warning bells going off and going off and going off, and it was so familiar. But you see, this person was a firefighter, so he went to the doctor and got diagnosed with PTSD. And of course, I did a deep dive into what that means. And a lot of the signs were similar as PTSD. So I was constantly making excuses for his bad behavior.
Right.
He had to get out of jail free with PTSD.
Right.
Whereas those same things, when you put them into, hey, I'm bipolar, that is not a get out of jail card free for me, right? Because I have experience with this. So, it took me a long time to sort it out. But once I did, it was like a gut punch. I mean, I was on my knees. It unleashed childhood. It brought back memories that had been buried and locked away for a long time. I started having nightmares. I was stuck living with that person for another 3 months as I searched for an apartment for me to move to. It was really tough. And I just shut down. I didn't even cry because I couldn't. I knew once I let those emotions out, I would never stop. And I was failing and flailing and buried under this darkness. And I felt deceived by him because he knew how I felt about my mother. And he knew he was bipolar. So to hide this from me was such a deception. I felt deceived by myself.
Right.
How could you not see this coming with all of your experience? And then even worse, once you're out of it and you have some clarity, you go, I did see it coming.
Yeah.
I saw it on day one. Day one, the flags were there and I ignored them because the love story was so beautiful and I wanted the love story.
Right.
I was finally getting my happily ever after, So then I felt angry at myself.
Self-blame.
And then I was angry at the universe. I was so angry. Because for me, it was like, why did you pull me into this beautiful relationship, making me think that this is where I finally, get my happily ever after? And just to do that, like, it was such a deception. So this time when I waited till I moved out before I sought help because I was not in the headspace.
Right.
I waited till I moved out. I settled my apartment, and then I asked a girlfriend who used to go to all kinds of satsangs and all these sort of things all the time. Monthly she'd go to these things, and I thought, oh, she's going to know someone. And so I asked, and she sent me to this channeler. And wow, what a gift! That was a gift. That was a gift from the universe. That was the gift from the universe. The other one was a lesson.
Yeah.
This was a gift, and she's the one who really, and when I went to her, I was pissed. I mean, I even went into that meeting saying, like, I'm so angry at the universe right now. Rah, 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 rah. And she was like, whoa.
Ooh, back
Like,
up.
whoa, lady. She doesn't know me, right? We had a 1 minute call on the phone to make an appointment, and this is how she's meeting me, like, rah. And so we had like a 2-hour session that day. We had a lot to talk about. We went through past lives. The one that was causing the trouble, did some healing around that, which happened so quickly. And that was really interesting to me, that you could just say 3 sentences and you've healed this karma from the past. I thought that was fascinating. And then we walked through this lifetime. And what I really loved about her, and what really impacted me and changed me and gave me the grace to find forgiveness for my abusers, was the way she really walked me through not just my childhood, but through my parents. And it wasn't even a big, long story. It was a matter of showing me that everything that was done to you was done to them. Aside from the religion, although their religious issues were there too, to be fair, right? It was just different religion. But, and she did that so that I could understand that broken people raise broken people.
Yeah.
Right? That's it. You can't get away from that law unless you've healed.
Right.
But if you are still broken people raise broken people.
Yeah.
She really helped me to understand the generational trauma.
Yeah.
And that was a really big piece of the puzzle for me. Again, later when it came to forgiving them, picturing them as children, that this happened to them, gives you the empathy.
Right.
It doesn't make it okay what they did, because I didn't become them. I've never abused anyone or been cruel to anyone, or at least not intentionally, that's for sure, right? So it doesn't excuse them for what they became, but it lays the groundwork to show that generational trauma is a really big thing. And when I started to heal as well, knowing that healing me heals my entire bloodline, that was a powerful incentive.
Yeah.
Doing it for myself should have been enough, and it was. But do you know what I'm saying? By knowing that you're also helping future generations, I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. So at this time, did you consider yourself agnostic or an atheist or no spirit whatsoever?
From the point that I left home and the church, if you will, until about my mid-20s, when I met my first, you're talking a good 17 to 26, right? We're talking almost 10 years. I don't know that I was agnostic, because I think I still had a fear of God. But no way in hell were you getting me into a church. I was definitely anti-establishment as far as religion goes. And I didn't know anything about any other religions, because nobody ever talked about any other religions. There is only one, Jay, obviously. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that was my upbringing. There's only one. Everyone else is going to hell, even the Catholics, right? Or any of the other religions out there. Only this religion is going. So I think I was just anti-everything.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't go as far as agnostic, because I had such a fear of going to hell still. Even though I didn't believe in it, that fear was still there. It was still there.
That's programmed into you. That's part of it.
Oh, and it was deep, deep, deep. You know, right until I was in my mid-40s, I still feared what lived under the bed. I mean, how ridiculous is that? And then how stupid do you feel? It's like, I'm a 45-year-old woman, And every night when I go to bed by myself, I'm still afraid of what's under the bed. I still, like, when I get close to the bed, do this little hop into the bed so that I don't linger by the bed where anything can grab me. My brain does not believe in this, but I'm still doing it. So clearly my subconscious has such deep programmings. I had to sit through an exorcism when I was 12. They forced me to sit through an exorcism and watch the whole thing. It was the most frightening thing I've ever seen in my life. And that's where the fear of demons really started, when I actually saw them, witnessed them, saw the foaming of the mouth, watched the superhuman strength, listened to the multiple voices coming out of that man as he said, I am legion, we are many. I mean, this was straight out of the Bible. I knew that. The Bible thrown down my throat for 10 years, for almost. So, I mean, I knew the Bible. I had memorized books of it. And that singular moment is where that fear came, for a really, really long time. We never should have been there for that.
What would you say to someone who you feel like has debilitating fear? What would you say to them to help them with that?
One of the very first things that I had to go through was the fear. I did not have like a gentle spiritual awakening. I mean, do any of us have a gentle spiritual awakening? But this was not a gentle, like, come on over, let's have a spiritual awakening. Oh, no. This was like smash me in the face spiritual awakening. And it was all, for me, centered around my fear of demons. Which I didn't even think were real, right? And so the first spiritual person I meet, well, the beautiful channeler lady that I met called it entities or darkness, and sort of showed me the fact that my mother was riddled with them, and that's where this behavior came from, and my exes were riddled with these entities. And that's what I was seeing in their eyes when I would look at their eyes and have that moment and go, oh man, that's not you anymore. Because, again, there were moments in both that last relationship and with my mother where I saw the eyes and I went, oh my God, that is not a human anymore. So again, I believed in that because I saw it with my own eyes, and yet I would make all these excuses, right? So for anyone going through fear, I learned a couple of things that were super powerful me, and it's going to take a minute if your fear is really, really, really strong, because when I started to write the memoir, I opened that door because I started to write about the demons and the exorcism and then my spiritual awakening. And again, more demons I literally had to face and get rid of. With this Reiki master I was working with, it was the most frightening thing I've ever done. And yet I wouldn't change it for the world. Because I got through it, right? I had to get through it in order to let go of that fear. But I clean my house every single day energetically. I think spiritual hygiene is super, super important. And that keeps the darkness out of my space. I'm an empath. I feel everything. So if I walk into a room, I know it's dark, right? And then I get the heebie-jeebies and I got to clean. Now I know I'm not to be afraid. I just clean it. Whereas before I'd be like, get me out of here. This is freaky. But I also learned from a woman, honestly, all you have to say is, I am not afraid. Like, it's so simple. It's so simple. It just seems like, is it that easy? But it is. There is no entity out there that is as powerful as our souls.
Right.
Once we understand that we are the most powerful thing on the planet, us humans, souls, right? It's not the human that's strong. It's the soul inside of us. And that darkness was created. It is not more powerful than us. We have nothing to fear. So if we stand in our sovereignty and find our power, and it took me a minute to get there, literally now, if I feel a tickle on my arm, because man, every time I'm doing something really powerful, like I'm writing my next book right now, it starts to attack because it does not want that message to get out, right? And so, but now the first time I felt tickles on my arm, I almost had a heart attack. I was calling my Reiki friend. Oh my God, they're in the house. Get it out. I'm freaking out, right? Now I don't need to call anybody now. All I need to say is, I am not afraid of you. Get out of my house now. So I clean my space every single day, get rid of that darkness. I create a golden bubble of protection around my home every day. So now that stuff isn't in my home or any space that I am, because I travel a lot. So I do this to every hotel room. I do it to the airplane I'm on. I clean everything. But I also know I have nothing to fear.
Right.
And that was the biggest lesson that I had to learn. I don't need to call anybody anymore when that stuff happens. I just have to know. And if I want to call someone, I'll call on someone in my team. Archangel Michael, I need your assistance, please. I can feel something in this space. Help me, please assist me to get rid of it. I don't want to give my power away either, right? So,
Right.
yeah, super, super important. We have nothing to fear.
So
We
at
really-
what point did you decide, I want to write a book? I want to put all this down, this journey onto a book?
Well, this also was it was mandated to me by this channeler woman that I went to go see. So after we walked through past life, present life, toxic relationships, here's a couple, like, let's start with healing your parents. We'll go from there. She then said, let's see now what message we have for you. What is your path? What is your blueprint? Let's figure out what you're supposed to do next. And so she consulted with my guides, and she was like, oh, you are supposed to write a book about this. And I'm like, I'm supposed to do what now? I've never written anything in my life. I am a great storyteller. I've always been a great storyteller. I'm a public speaker by nature. I worked on cruise ships. As an assistant cruise director, I'm now a tour guide. I tell stories for a living. I love storytelling, but writing is not, well, it is the same, but it's a whole different ballgame, right?
Right.
As I was like, I don't know how to write. And she said, you'll figure it out. And I said, when am I supposed to do this? Who's got time to do this? And she said, don't you worry, honey. You're going to start in October 1st, very specific. And it's going to take you 2 years. And don't worry, you're going to find the time. So I started writing, and she said, we want you to just take stories from your life, write them down until they're complete, start on another story. For now, that's what we want from you. You'll figure out what the book's about. You'll figure out where it's supposed to start and end. It is going to be published. She's like, I see it bound and ready to go and on a bookshelf. Like, it is going to be published. She said, through the writing, you are going to find your own healing. And when you're finished, other people who are in similar situations to you are going to find healing, because there is so much mental illness out there. And I've had so much experience with alcoholism. Well, he was a drug addict, to be fair. So addiction. I've had every partner fell into these categories. So I've had so much experience with it. But she said, people are going to heal. And that was really the driving light for me, was knowing what it was going to do for other people. Because I really, really struggled with the idea of writing a memoir. I didn't want to do that to my family. I didn't want to do that to my parents, especially. And I didn't want to do it to my exes. I really, really didn't.
Was the book therapy for you?
Oh my God. Yes, it was.
Yeah.
And, it's actually kind of beautiful for me the way that it happened, in the way that as a tour guide, I work seasonally, and I always have the winter off, and I work all summer in Canada here. And which is why she also said, you'll start in October, because I usually finish work by then. And I kind of sat down in October and just put together like ideas of stories I would tell, but I didn't really start writing until January 2020. I lost my job. I flew to Bali. I had this crazy experience with this Reiki person, met my demons head on. It was craziness. Really learned that, I'm in it now. Came home from that, started writing the book, lost my job. COVID hit. I had 2 years without a job, exactly as she predicted. You will have 2 years to write this book, and you will have the time. Well, she wasn't wrong. And then it was like, I had no money. Like, I had some money in the bank. I never let myself run dry, but it was scary, because you go, man, here's how much money I have. Like, I can survive 6 months and then I'm done. So I'll write and I'll see where it goes. And the money, the Canadian government actually gave us a little bit of help here in Canada. I fell under those guidelines, thank God. That gave me another 6 months of at least paying the rent. You know what I mean? It wasn't a big amount, but like, I just kept like going on faith. When I went in, I went all in this time. No 1 foot in and 1 foot out like I was since my mid-20s. I went all in this time. I just had faith that spirit would provide. I would sometimes walk along the street and I'd find $100 bill on the floor and I'd be like,
wow.
Right? Like it was crazy just to say, I've got you. And it would help me to go, okay, I'm held by spirit, right? I am okay. So then when I started writing, I would write and write and write, and I would get writer's block, and I'd be like, I know what I want to say. I've been working on this paragraph for like 3 hours. Like, okay, it's time to put the pen down, so to speak. Like if you're on the same paragraph for 3 hours, you're not getting anywhere. So I'd be like, I don't understand what the problem is. I know what I want to say. I'm in the mood. What's the problem? And then I would realize that spirit was saying to me, no, honey, you need to stop writing. And now I need you to go heal that. All that stuff you just wrote about. No. We're not going to just keep going. I need you to heal that. So it was stop and go and stop and go and stop and go the whole time. Because then I needed to figure out, how do I heal that?
Right.
Forgiveness, we know to start there, right? Okay, so I'd forgive, but it was like, God, there's got to be more than that. Like this is deeper and this is bigger. And that's when I turned to YouTube for the first time in my life. And I'd be like, Spirit, I don't even know what I'm doing or what. I've never been on YouTube before. Like, please show me what I need to hear. And the first person that would pop up on the homepage would be like, how to heal your childhood trauma. And I'd go, oh, okay, perfect. And I managed to find really good teachers. And then I just did this deep dive. And over the last 4 years, I've listened to just hundreds and hundreds of them as I tried things that worked for me, tried things that didn't work for me, but maybe worked for someone else. And I started to just compile all of these different ways to do things because she said to me, once you're finished with the memoir, you will follow it up with a workbook. So keep notes. And thank God she said that because for 4 years, I took notes. What I did to heal and what really, really resonated with me. And because she said, you're going to follow up your memoir with a workbook. And that will go out and it's going to be the how to, give tools so that they can heal.
So take me through the book itself from beginning to end. How do you approach it? And what, if a person's reading the book, what stages are we going through?
Are we talking about my memoir?
Yeah.
Yes. Originally, I wrote it as it happened because it was the easiest way for me to write. And, I went chronological order. After I did, 3 solid years on this, editing it 4 times. I mean, it was epically long. It was just ridiculous when I wrote the first one. So I cut. And then I also understood where it was going. So I streamlined. But also with each edit, I had to do the healing again. Right. Not the same healing, but, you wipe away a layer of mud. There's more mud underneath and it reveals more and more and more. And that's what healing is, right? You can't just
peeling an onion.
Exactly. Yes, I forgave my parents, but then specific incidents would come up and I'd be triggered and I'd go, oh, I need to heal that memory. And spirit really shows you the way, it shows you how to do that. So because I had the memoir and it was all literally laid out there, all of the pain and the suffering all right in front of me, every time I went through, all 4 times, I healed every time. But when I finally hired a professional editor, the first thing out of her mouth before she even read it was, I don't want this in chronological order. And I started to laugh because the whole time I was writing, I was thinking, wonder if this needs to have flashbacks to childhood in it. But that was a far more complicated way to write. So I took the easy out and I did chronological order. I also knew I was going to hire a professional editor at some point. And that was the first thing she said. I want to throw the pages in the air and I want to put them back together and I don't want them in order. And I was like, oh God. So what we did was, and I had, again, I'd been thinking this the whole time. And so when she said it, I knew she was the perfect editor for me because she was literally pulling things out of my mind that I had not said to her. And I had, towards the end of the book at the time, the meeting with the channeler, the trip to Bali, and the whole experience in Bali. And that was the spiritual awakening. So she said, I want to leave Bali at the end, but I want you to pull the conversation with the channeler, and I want that to be chapter 1. Because people are going to read your conversation with her, and they're going to know, like, this is what this book is about. Like, there's no hiding. This is about, spiritual awakening and trauma and all these things. So that's what I did. So the book really starts with my meeting with the channeler, and then it goes back to childhood.
Right.
So it starts in 2019, really. And I go through a little bit of childhood, and then it kind of has flashbacks in it. So I talk about college, getting my degree, meeting, this person that I end up with later. And then what I did is I took specific challenges with the partners and I tried to choose my flashbacks into childhood to match the trauma that drove the current problem, if that makes sense.
Right.
So I'm with an addict for 7 years and I can't seem to leave him and I feel sorry for him. And so I went back into childhood to show why I developed that. So in chronological order, it goes from childhood, joining the church when I'm 10, leaving home at 17. I travel the world for a couple of years before I go to college. I get a degree. And then I walk through the 3 significant relationships that I had in my life. So now there's flashbacks, if that makes sense, within that. But really, that was kind of the structure. It leads me to breaking up with this last partner, meeting with the channeler, and then I go to Bali and I have my full-on spiritual awakening.
Okay, you said that you went to Bali. Tell me about that trip and what happened.
While I was on the phone with this or meeting with this channeler woman, I had been chatting with a girlfriend about going on vacation. I usually take a vacation every winter. And we had talked about either Thailand or Bali. We had both been to both because we worked on cruise ships, but that was it. We'd been on a cruise ship. So we wanted to go back and spend more time. And we were up in the air with which one we were going to go to. And we were looking at tours that went to both. In the middle of that, I went and had this meeting with the channeler and I said to her, well, I'm thinking of going. When she told me I was going to write the book and everything, I just sort of, thinking out loud was like, well, I'm thinking of going to Thailand or Bali this winter. Maybe I'll just tack on a couple extra weeks to my vacation, rent an Airbnb and start writing. And she's like, yeah, you're going to Bali. And I'm like, oh, okay. She's like, Bali, you're going to Bali. So I was like, okay. So I didn't even hesitate. I was like, I'm going to Bali. And so that narrowed it down for us. And, I chose an organized tour for the first 8 days, a wellness tour. Never been on one before, but I was, entering this new journey and I thought, oh, how good would that be? And we're going to meet with a local healer and there's a whole lot of yoga and meditation involved, 2 things which I did not do up until this point. And I thought, oh, what a great way to sort of see if I like these things and to kickstart them. And so I did this wonderful wellness tour. It was really interesting because there were no couples on this tour, which is pretty rare. Usually there's couples on a tour. There were only 12 people on this tour. I like small tours with small amounts of people. It was all singles. And because it was a wellness tour, on the first day or the second day, the guide said to us, I want to know, introduce yourself, tell everybody why you chose this particular tour. And I never heard anyone ask that question before. It's usually, what's your job? Where are you from? What's your name? That kind of thing. She was like, why did you choose this tour? And what I found so interesting is that every single person on that tour almost said the same thing. I've been going through a really rough spot, whether it was a divorce or, I quit my 40-year job, whatever it was. And I just needed to get some clarity and some time to myself. And I'm sort of seeking answers. And it was just a really interesting. So that was the vibe of everybody on the tour. Right. Everybody was there looking for something, right? So I meet this girl from Toronto who's a Reiki master. And we're on this tour, and I have busted a hip 2 years prior to this. And I mean, I have gained 40 pounds. I'm limping. I've always been a dancer, an athlete, an athletic person, not an actual athlete, but I've always enjoyed, I'm very, very outgoing, hiking, you name it. This, busting my hip, that was it. I couldn't hike anymore. I could barely walk anymore. It was 2 blocks to get to the grocery store. I'd be limping the whole way. It was really bad. It really debilitated me. And it was actually a source of fighting with my partner sometimes too, because he was also very outdoorsy, and he would get really irritated that I couldn't do this 5-hour hike up a mountain. And it was like, it's my hip, right? And I went to 100 doctors, and they all kept saying, nothing's wrong with you. And, in Canada, we have free medical, but, it comes with a caveat, and that is that they don't want to spend money on you. So they kept telling me nothing was wrong with me. And I was really frustrated and really depressed about it. And it was I gained a ton of weight. So it was really horrible. And one of the things that excited me in Bali is that we were going to see a shaman, a healer. And I thought, oh, cool. Yeah. He's going to heal my hip, right? If modern medicine can't do it, I would take a healer over that any day. And so we went to see him, and I'll keep this part short, but we went to see him. And in the end, he said, I can't fix you. And I was so upset, but he put his hand on my lower back for a few minutes, and it got really, really warm. And he said, there is so much blockage here in your lower back, but I can't heal you. And when I got out of that meeting, I started crying and crying and crying. It was ridiculous. I couldn't stop. And I mean, for 2 hours, I just cried. And I was like, good God, I'm on vacation. These people don't know me. They must think I'm crazy. I really was like, what's happening to me right now? I didn't realize that by touching my lower back, he stirred up all this gunk in my root chakra, right? Lower back, and then just left it there to play. And that's what released all that emotion. So this Reiki person, this Reiki master, comes up to me a couple hours later. We're walking through some rice terraces, and she's like, so what happened back there with that healer? And I told her, and she's like, what a weird thing to say. She said, let me work on it. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And she's like, well, I do Reiki. And I said, oh, honey, you're on vacation. Yeah. Okay. I'm a tour guide. I never tell anyone when I have a nurse or a doctor on board, because they're not going to be on vacation. Right. I will not be seeking your, Reiki while you are on a vacation. And she's like, no, I really want to work on you. And I'm like, you're on vacation. And she's like, no, you're not listening. Spirit is telling me that I have to work on you. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's different, right? She's like, no, you're not listening, right? She was trying to just be nice about it. And I was like, no. And so we did this Reiki session on the beach. I've never had Reiki before, never had any kind of body work aside from a normal massage before. And if I was on the fence at all about what I believed, I was not by the time this was over. Wow. She did all this stuff on me. Okay, when the Reiki was happening, I didn't really feel much except some tickling on my head and some itchiness and things. But when it was over, and I said to her, what exactly do you see when you're doing this? I'm so curious. Oh my God. It was a 2-hour conversation, so I won't give you that. But what stuck with me the most is she said, did you go through an exorcism when you were 12? I said, wow. I surely did. She said, yeah. So she's like, okay. So here's, let me just go back for a second. When that exorcism happened, what happened is the pastor of the church came over after church. They invited this young man, probably in his mid-20s at the time, to come over because they suspected he was full of demons, and they planned this exorcism. Of course, they never told us, the children. We were just there, just gleefully having some, coffee or not coffee, probably we were children, but, some cake or whatever that you do after church. And all of a sudden praying broke out, and we were like, what's happening right now? Right. And so my mother comes over and she says, hey, we're about to perform an exorcism. She said to my youngest sister, who was, would have been 9 or so at the time, go to bed. You're too young for this, but you two, me and my older sister, you better sit right here and don't stop praying for 1 second. Because when the demons leave that man, they need somewhere to go, and children are an easy target. Good God.
Oh my
Can you imagine how
gosh.
fearful we were? Imagine
Yeah.
how afraid we were.
Yeah.
And knowing what I know now, that dark is attracted to dark, light is attracted to light, right? The law of attraction. By
Mm-hmm.
instilling fear in us, do you see how she put the vibration in us of fear so that the demons definitely came into us?
Right.
Because we were full of darkness.
She opened
Fear.
that door.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, okay, this is why I've been haunted by this memory. And like I said, for 25 years, I told myself that what happened that night was not real. I do not believe in this.
Yeah.
Yet I was still afraid of, I always lived by myself. I was always a single person. I had partners, but I always lived by myself. So I had a lot of fear around that. So now we're in this thing. And she said, so when I had my hands on your lower back for a long time, she said, my God, I just wanted to vomit. It was so powerful. She said, and it was all your mother.
Yeah.
I mean, this was your mother. She said, that exorcism you went through when you were 12, your mother was right. Those demons went into your back. At this point, I almost lost it because I'm just like, no, I don't want any part of this. I don't want to hear about, right? Like, you've got to be joking. And so I said, okay, here's what I don't understand. You're telling me that I've had all this crap living in my lower back since I was 12. I'm now well into my 40s. How come I haven't felt any pain until now?
Right.
It was only when I busted my hip that this incredible lower back pain really started, because the whole everything, the whole leg and everything gets affected because, of course, you walk differently, right?
Right.
You favor that leg. And she said, well, think of it as an athlete who injures themselves when they're a teen or even in their 20s, but that pain isn't going to come until they hit their 40s or 50s.
Right.
And so she said, think of it like that. Yes, it's been living inside of you, but it needed time to manifest. When you fell and broke your hip, that was actually spirit telling you to slow down and don't date this person. My last part. I was like, well, that makes perfect sense. It happened within 2 weeks of us,
Yeah.
dating, that I fell and busted my hip. The spirit was literally saying slow down, and I just plowed through straight ahead, right?
Right.
So think about it. The demons of your mom and the demons of this exorcism and the entities in your partner, they all came out to play when you busted your hip. This just busted it all wide open. And she said, I could literally see all around your tailbone, at the bottom of your tailbone, it was just like smoke, black smoke all around it. And she said it was really contained, though, to your root chakra area, but it was starting to spread across the lower back. So she's like, I pulled it all out and it resisted. It did not want to go. I was gobsmacked. I mean, from nothing to this, it was like I said, my spiritual awakening was not ushered in gently. Like, it was smash in your face. Yes, this is real. Yes, this is happening. So that's what happened.
In Bali.
But you removed it, thank God.
Yeah. Thank goodness. So, who do you think that your book would benefit the most? I mean, what's your audience that you're shooting for?
When I started writing, my audience was people who were broken like me. People who are trapped in a pattern of toxic relationships, who are looking at their lives and going, how did I get here? How did I get here? Right? When I handed it over to my editor, I thought she kind of said it best as well. She said, Tina, this is the book I will be handing over to all of my girlfriends that are in bad relationships. This is the book you give them. I tried to really give almost like a case study of one human being, myself, childhood into the relationships. I really tried to show my thinking around them and how I thought I was healing and growing. And then straight through to like, okay, I've had enough. The minute I stopped asking, what the hell is wrong with all the men out there? And started to say, what's wrong with me?
Right.
That I only attract this kind of person. That's when my spiritual awakening began, right? I started to ask the right question. The minute you shine a light on your pain, it already starts to become healed, right? It starts to lose its power. My book is really for anyone caught in toxic relationships, and wondering how to get free, how to change, because I have done that. I will never be in a toxic relationship again because I have changed, not them, but I changed me. And therefore, I have changed. Once I change me, I change my own vibration, which means that I've changed the kind of person I'm bringing into my life. I have such strong boundaries now as well, which was part of my healing process.
Well, Tina, is there anything that we haven't covered so far that you want to make a point to get out there?
Only to say, if you are me, if you are out there and you're living in these relationships, I want you to ask yourself a couple of questions, because sometimes people aren't even sure. You get so gaslighted by the partners when you're dealing with these partners that you don't even know where you begin or end anymore, or where you are. So ask yourself these questions. Am I always waiting for the other shoe to drop? Am I always walking on eggshells around this person? If it is yes to both of those, you are in a toxic relationship. And no one is coming to save you. So please, please save yourself, because you can. And I promise you, it is beautiful on the other side of healing. It is beautiful. I love my life now. I feel strong. I feel healthy. I don't live in fear at all. So get out of survival mode so that you can start thriving.
Okay, and where can someone who wants your book, where can they find it?
My book is for sale on Amazon, so you can just go directly to Amazon and Google Finding My Sovereignty. I'll just flash that for you one more time. So like that, Finding My Sovereignty.
There you go.
Also, my website, I have an author's website, and the link to Amazon is there. And also, you can read about the book and myself there if you choose to. This is www.sovereign&sage. So just like Finding My Sovereignty, sovereign and sage, one word, .com.
Great. Terrific. Tina, thank you so much for being my guest. I have enjoyed this and hearing your story, and I just hope the best for you now that you're healed, all that you're going to do now. Do you have another book planned?
I do. I actually, I finished writing it this week, so I'm really thrilled, because she had always said, you're going to have a workbook that follows this. Again, once people read your book, and it's going to conclude with me, finding forgiveness for my father. And then it stops there. So for me, if I was reading this book, my next question would be like, oh my God, what did you do to heal? Right? So that's the next book, is the workbook with just super practical, no cost things that you can do to heal, because I fully believe in Reiki and all of this somatic healing. I believe in all of that. I think it's so good for you. I also think a lot of people can't afford it. I couldn't. It was COVID when I started doing my spiritual week. I didn't have a penny to my name. So I really made sure that all of the tools in the book were free.
Right.
I put suggestions of things like, hey, if you like to work with crystals, because I love crystals, here's some crystals that might be good for this, but they're not necessary.
Right.
So I really wanted to make sure that everything in the book was actionable, simple, it works because I did it to myself, and no cost.
Right. Do you know yet when that workbook will be available?
Yes, my editor is not available till March, so we are aiming for June, the beginning of June.
So
and if it's
everyone
done
should get
before
your
that,
book.
then great.
Right. Get your book now, read it, and then you'll be ready for the workbook coming out later.
Yes, yeah, and I will have that on my website. So if you're just on my author's website, I'll announce when that's ready on that site. And the podcasts are all up there too.
We'll put all those links below this program so that viewers and listeners can find it. Tina, thank you again for being on my show. I enjoyed so much talking to you.
Oh, thank you. I enjoyed it as well. Thank you for having me, Jay.
And we'll see you next time on The J. Michael Show.
Goodbye.